Hi ninjas, Paul here. Welcome to the fourth instalment in our series on navigating the process of selecting and implementing a HR information system. I'm here with our People Tech ambassador, Lee Joinson. Hi Lee.
Hey Paul, how are you?
I'm very well indeed. Are you well?
Yeah, very good, thank you. Very good.
Good. The observant amongst the viewers will notice that I'm not Lizzie. You've had an upgrade or a downgrade, dependent on your point of view. Lizzie is busy doing some work with her clients at the moment, so here's me standing in. But I have watched with interest the work that's been done so far, and I think it's been brilliant. I think it's been really useful. Our first instalment was around defining your requirements around your new system. So we talked about the heat map and the questionnaires, which I think people will find massively useful. And then we went on to talk around the business case and how you position your project internally within your organization and understand the value that it's going to bring so you can measure that as you go forward. And then last week, we got to the exciting bit of looking at system demonstrations and what we call the beauty parade, and how to do that in a way that you can objectively judge these systems. Because, of course, if you just have vendors come in and show you what they want to show you, it's really hard to actually compare apples with apples. So all really important stuff. And what we're talking about today, super important as well, and often overlooked, I think. So Lee, what are we going to go through today?
Yeah, so today hopefully won't be as full on as some of our previous sessions, but we want to talk about the stream of setting yourself up for success. So yes, we've got to choose a vendor on one stream of work, but also when that vendor's chosen, we want to be ready to go, almost there or straight away. So effectively what we're talking about is internally setting the project up for success. We talk historically about HR systems projects that fail, and the gotchas and the watch outs that come along with that, and also how we make sure that we control the cost of our project, because one of the things, if we don't get these things right, this sort of organizational stuff that we're going to start with today, and we'll touch on others later in the series, but certainly organizational design and knowing how your organization is structured and being able to clearly articulate that is something that whichever vendor you choose will need to know. And if you can't articulate that quickly and straight away, then that's going to cause a delay for your project, and your vendor's already engaged, so you're already paying them money. So what you want to be able to do is go, right, hit the ground running. Here's some documentation that says how our organization's structured. Or you've got an SME who's been around, a subject matter expert who's been around the organization, knows the pitfalls, knows the little quirks and all the pain points around the hierarchy and how it works. But you're just getting ourselves through some of that and calling out some of the key gotchas that are going to help you land your project quickly and as you expect.
Great, that's good, Lee. And I guess the organisation design will be a familiar term to the HR people, but not necessarily from a system perspective. But I guess why it's important is it's about who can see what in terms of data, who can approve what in terms of financial reporting. How's that all set up within your organisation? Your system needs to understand all this stuff, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you've nailed it there, Paul. I mean, on the operations side of any organization, normally it's fairly straightforward to describe the hierarchy. It's quite structured. It'll, this group of people report to this person who reports to that person, and it's straightforward. Very often, your pain points come when you're into the office, in your head office or your support function, and you'll find there's anomalies around the business, people who sort of have a job that doesn't naturally sit in any other function, and they'll report to finance to have their expenses approved, but they'll report to whoever the local regional manager is to have their performance review done, because that's the only person they really see on a day-to-day basis, and they'll report to the global function to have their strategy set and all the other kinds of nuances, which when you talk about them, when we're having a conversation, it's really easy, but articulating that in a system is really quite complicated. And those are the kinds of pitfalls and tweaks that, either business process needs to take care of. And we say, actually, from now on, this person's just going to report into this one reporting line, and that makes sense, because that doesn't mean we have to find a workaround in the system, or we go in eyes open to this complexity that's in the organization, so the vendors understand exactly what it is that they're going to need to be able to build and work to, if that makes sense.
So let's say I'm your client, Lee. Why can't you just get on with it and I give you all this stuff just before we go live?
Yeah, I mean, essentially, that's a really key point. Have you got that stuff to give me? Because most clients won't have.
No.
Most clients may have a printed hierarchy chart or a PDF org chart that they publish that'll go down to a certain level, but it won't have everyone in the business on it. Also, very often they're manual jobs for someone to do. So someone's actually doing a PowerPoint and updating the org chart and then publishing that for everyone. It's very often out of date. There'll be levers on there. The senior exec position that person's moved on has not been filled yet. So there's a vacant spot that's not, and no one's comfortable putting up on the intranet for everyone to see. Whatever the political things are around that, or the resource constraints that are around that, it's really unusual unless you have a system, an incumbent system already that's managing your people, for that to be really easy to articulate. Obviously, I came from McDonald's before, and the franchisee structure in there was another one that was really new to a lot of vendors. So you're really trying to explain that a franchisee is an organization in itself. The franchisee has a dotted relationship with McDonald's, and it's this person who represents McDonald's when they're talking to the franchisee, but the franchisee doesn't report to that person. So from a security perspective, they shouldn't be able to see all the things that a franchisee should see. That's a sort of specific organizational example, and that's just a franchisee model. There's lots of different flavors of nuances and pain that are sometimes difficult to articulate to someone who hasn't lived and breathed your organization for the length of time that you have. So, being able to plot down on paper or describe very clearly that this role reports to this role, and also other complexities around things like grade. So grades and job roles don't always fit into the same bucket. You can have people with the same job role with different grades, and all of these, complexities, sophistications, however you want to describe them, can be really difficult to explain to someone who's outside. And in the same way that when there's a technical document that we want the business to review, we expect the technical people to change their language for the business to be able to understand. The business needs to be able to articulate in a way that the systems people can understand. This means that, means this, means that, if that makes sense.
No, I get it, and I could see why you'd want it early in the project, and I could see why actually I would want it for my business as well. So show me, educate me. I'm excited.
Let's again, there's lots of detail in here, and this is written for someone who hasn't seen this video and wants to go and get into the detail and see where we are on the journey. So I don't intend to go through this in masses of detail. I'd just rather have a conversation around it. But exactly what we talked about, your organization, the design of your organization, as you say, most HR people will be very familiar with the term organizational design, but that's the foundation that your system's built on. As you say, things like security, things like approvals, all of those, who approves my holiday? Is that the same person who approves my expenses? Who can see my record from a GDPR perspective? Only people who are entitled to see my record should be able to see my record, and only things that they need to be able to see should be visible to the people who can see my record. So on the flip side of that, I should be able to see everything about my record should I wish to. So all of those things need taken into account when we're looking at organisational design. One of the ones that's sort of kind of complicated is when you've got people with in the middle level responsibility. So if I report to you, Paul, it's very easy. You're my manager. You see my PR. You see my pay rate. All of those other things. Certainly in things like retail, you may have assistant managers that sort of sit in between and
Yes.
should be able to see some of the things that are related to my record, but not all. So shift managers in McDonald's is a great example. They come in, they open and close the restaurant. They're responsible for the restaurant when the manager isn't there. They need to be able to see things about my record. They need to be able to call me if I've not turned up for my shift. They need to be able to see what my training progress is like. All those other important things. But there's certain aspects of my record that they should not be able to see. So they shouldn't be able to see my pay rate. They shouldn't be able to see my performance review, all of those kinds of things. So it's getting those levels right, those security right, and again, getting it down on paper so that whether that's on a PowerPoint document or a spreadsheet or whatever else, or being able to at least verbally articulate that when you get into workshops with your vendor. So that's the sort of organizational design bit. Also worth clearly being able to articulate how the company is structured. So not just the who reports to who, what I'd call the person hierarchy, but how the company is structured. So this is sort of generally speaking how we'd articulate that element suite. Other vendors will have other ways of articulating this, and annoyingly, clients will have their own words for these things that we have to line up on getting into the session. So first and foremost, I think a vendor should bend themselves to the language that the business uses. So I should be changing my language in documentation to match this, but this is my starting point, right? So market is the whole big brand, everybody who's going to be in the scope of the system. Various organizations can then sit within that system. So particularly when I talk about the franchisee model, each franchisee would be its own organization that sits under their brand. And, one organization shouldn't be able to see things from another organization. There should be clear lines, even virtual lines between those organizations to prevent sort of data leakage and all those other kinds of lovely things.
And Lee, is this one of the ways that the systems are differentiated from each other in terms of the level of configurability around the org structure? Things like multi-company, handling franchises, lots of different job roles. Is that the more complicated you are, the more sophisticated a system you're going to need to buy?
There's absolutely spot on, Paul. The whole thing about knowing your company's nuances and being able to articulate that to your vendors in your beauty parade or in your RFP, which is the next stage when you get on to the final 2 or 3 vendors that you're looking at. They need to be able to do these things. They're absolutely key to some organizations, whereas others won't mind at all. I've got a 4,000 employee organization and the structure is really simple and it looks like it. I don't necessarily need to worry about this level of sophistication. But yeah, absolutely, it's a sort of key requirement. And if your vendor can't do these things, it's a red blotch straight away, right? It's if you've got a franchisee organization, if you've got a franchisee structure and your vendor can't do multi-organizations, there's no point in talking to them. Doesn't matter how shiny the front screen is. You're going to get into GDPR issues, legislative issues, compliance issues, and the project will be a non-starter.
Sure.
So underneath an organization, you might have multi-companies, which you attach your payrolls to and all of that lovely mathematics, etc. And then within each company, you've probably got various sites and departments, and they might be an office or a retail outlet or whatever those things might be. And then within each site, you'll have a position So a position is the job role, and then a job role sits within a position, and you can have multiple instances of that same job role in that position, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're creating things like permissions and security by job role rather than by individual. So you create a job role, then you assign that job role to those people that it's appropriate to. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely right. So as you bring someone into that position that we've identified here, they'll automatically inherit the responsibilities, the access, the permissions of that are set against that job role.
Yep.
The smarter systems will allow you to do overrides at different levels of this structure. So you can say national minimum wage as an example. At the market level, we're setting the national minimum wage to be this. In my organisation, I want the minimum rates to be this.
Mm-hmm.
For this particular site that finds it difficult to hire, I want the minimum rates to be this. And for this specific position in my site, I want the minimum rates to be this. So you normally expect those responsibilities or those numbers to cascade down the organisation, but have overrides available to you at various different levels as you need them.
Sure. And Lee, if my structure then changes post go live, assumably this stuff's reconfigurable.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, depending on, again, the sophistication of the software, we'll say whether it's a job the client can do themselves. Certainly at Element Suite, the clients can do them themselves, but if it's a big change, we want to do that for them to make sure you don't get tripped up, because again, you're in the space of GDPR and potential breaches if you get that wrong. And the more buttons and bells and whistles we give you to pull, the easier it is to break. I think that's a Star Trek line somewhere along the line.
No, yeah. I get it. I kind of see this as almost like the skeleton of the system. I mean, everything else is built off it. So I'm not sure that I'd want to be messing around and changing it. I think I'd rather have someone like you that knows what they're doing.
There you go. Let's come on to hierarchies, okay? Because I think we sort of talked about the organisation and how that's built, but normally organisations are used to working to a hierarchy. The more advanced you get, the more you realise you need more than one hierarchy in the business. So you've got your sort of reporting line hierarchy that says, you do my PR, you are my manager kind of hierarchy.
Yeah.
But a lot of the time, hierarchy depends on timing. So if we ask accounts what the hierarchy is, it is usually who reports to who, what site reports to who on a specific date of the month each month. So fourth working day of the month, that's the hierarchy, and the hierarchy stays the same for the whole month, and then it changes next month, so that those financial reports can all line up to a particular comparable time in each month. And very often you'll see systems driven off this accounts hierarchy, but in people situations that doesn't work. If I've been promoted today, I need access today to be able to do the things that I need to be able to do today. So you'll have effectively a finance hierarchy and separately a person hierarchy, and potentially you might want a third reporting hierarchy that allows you to model the hierarchy at a particular time and then report based on how things were then or are now. So there's various different flavors of hierarchy that need to be considered. Again, get into this with your vendor as soon as possible and be really clear on, is it okay for us to keep doing what we've doing, how we've ever done it before? There'll be cross-functional conversations to have here, right? Because if finance are the owners of hierarchy at the moment, they'll not want to change. They'll not want to move that. And if they do, we need to influence them to say, right, your hierarchy actually needs to be a cut of the person hierarchy, just taken once a month when you need it. or whichever way around you choose to solve that problem. But there absolutely needs to be a discussion, and you need to understand what the implications are of what conversation you're having. And if people are having questions like that, get them on the Facebook group, get them on there, and we'll answer them in as quickly as we can, in as much detail as we can.
I'm guessing that kind of the reporting hierarchy from a cost and finance perspective is probably in their finance system or their account system if they've got something in place. Is that right?
But essentially what we're saying is, if you get those two systems out of sync, if you haven't got someone making changes in two places, so the best thing to do is have one feed the other. One master of the organisation, and when that changes, update it once a month for accounts, or have it on a time, or accounts have a workaround on their end that helps it all work together the way that you need it to. What you don't want is two people trying to do the same job. And similarly, if they have differences, you end up with things out of sync and creating duplicates and all sorts of horrible pain, which is one of the things we want to try and avoid.
Yeah, makes sense.
So we're into job roles. Again, I won't dwell on this too much, but this is around sort of training plans, competencies, setting up recruitment, things like job descriptions, all of that stuff. On the HR side, salary bands, which we touched on already, pay basis, so hourly and salaried, understanding what happens when someone moves from hourly to salaried and backwards. Even though the backwards one doesn't happen very often, it does happen, and the systems need to be able to accommodate those kinds of things. Yeah, very often that means a termination on payroll and moving to another payroll, because usually companies will have an hourly paid payroll and a salaried payroll, and from a HMRC perspective, that needs to be terminated on one payroll and effectively a new hire on the new payroll, on the other payroll. But as far as their HR record, you want that to be continuous service, and so those kinds of things all need to be understood, and being able to articulate that, really important.
And Lee, in terms of the scope of my project, and I guess going back to the heat map, if I'm not looking for the talent module, then I guess I don't need the career path competency bit necessarily. What I need here depends on which modules it is that I'm implementing. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. It is. I mean, normally you'd be HR would be at the core of what you're doing, or you've already got a HR system. You've probably done that first. So most of that stuff would be understood and articulated already. But yeah, you are right. It's worth having the future in mind, though, when you do your implementation. If you're doing a project to tick the red off your heat map, but you've got some amber on your heat map as well, it's worth just sort of making sure that stuff's understood, so that for future proofing, next project is $3,000 instead of 30 grand or whatever else it is.
Great point. Yeah, makes sense.
Okay, so that's job roles, and similarly performance management. If you're putting a performance system in, normally we expect so organisationally, internally, I think usually you'd expect there to be a mission statement, goals set as objectives for the organisation that will then cascade down to the next reporting line. BFO will then go, well, of the company objectives, these two are the ones that are key for me, and therefore I'll have this, and then that'll pass down to their reporting line, and they'll tweak those. So you almost want those goals and objectives to cascade, so that everybody's goals feed into the overall company goals in some way or other, plus development objectives and whatever else. But at the core of what they're doing, from an HR perspective, you really want everyone sort of gunning for the same outcomes. So you're having the facility to be able to cascade those, and therefore who needs to be able to see what. Also important to think about and important to look at.
Yep, makes sense.
And then we're down to my favourite bit, which is what are the gotchas, what are the key things that we need to sort of think about. So GDPR and data protection, obviously, we've talked about already. Difference between organisations and who can see what, and how we draw those lines between what's reasonable for someone to see, what they're entitled to see, what they absolutely shouldn't see.
Yeah.
And then what happens when things go don't work to the normal. So if someone is ill, what happens, and how do we work around that? One of the projects that I was on quite a long time ago, we did an absolutely sterling job of following the process and making that process seamless, and it was absolutely beautiful. What we didn't do was, if that person doesn't do that thing that they're supposed to, then what happens? Or if that person actually rejects that absence, even though it's not supposed to be rejected, what will happen, and how does the system behave? And that created a real business change effort, an additional business change effort to correct those things and go back round and circle back and then win people back over, because the system was crap when we first put it in, and it's not done what it said on the tin, and all those things you promised. So delegation and overrides, are really, really important. I said about the sort of configuring different rules at different levels is the override thing, but the delegation is, you're going on holiday, I'm your assistant, so for the period of your holiday you can give me access to the notifications, approvals and things that you would normally take care of, and I can take care of them for a short period. Similarly, if someone goes off on long-term sick, unexpected, HR admin people can go in and set that delegation for you so that someone else can act in that role, whether that's someone at another site looking after your site as well, or whether it's an assistant that's picking up additional responsibility. I talked about head office, the idea that, there's always anomalies in there, and people who don't necessarily follow the rules or the structure that a system would expect. I guess it's kind of knowing those, and sometimes you don't know all of them, but trying to dig out the kinds of things that feel like they might not naturally sit in a system. Again, I'll reiterate, they're so easy to sort of talk about, and isn't it just that? And the idea of someone reporting into someone that even doesn't sit in the system, and how will the system behave in that situation, and knowing that there might be a workaround for that, and accepting that, or being prepared to bring that into scope and making sure that there's an integration that takes care of it, or whatever else it is. So head office can be it can be really straightforward. In some of the implementations we've done, it's been really straightforward. In others, it can be really, really complex. So again, really being able to articulate that, really, really important. And then, as we called out before, there's the security requirements and making sure that's aligned with your sort of vendor capability. The other one that's not on here that I shout out is about having a unique record for everyone, and we'll come on to this when we talk about data in a couple of weeks' time. But the very often you'll be using multiple systems as data sources that might not have everybody in both of them, if that makes sense. So maybe you've got a payroll system that you think's got everyone in it, but also you've got a learning system that's got other people in it, and some records need terminating in one or the other, and you'll have one identifier in one system, like you'll have a payroll number in your payroll system, maybe you use email address in your training system, and those are the ways that people are identified. One of the real benefits of getting a sort of single source of truth is getting a new number for everyone, that is everybody, each individual, and you can keep track of that record. So understanding what the scope of that is, and where the what we call data cleansing needs doing, but just sort of tidying up those records, is where these two things sort of start to cross over. So we'll come on to that a bit more next time.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think implementing a new system is a real opportunity for you to do a bit of housekeeping around that data data sort of cleansing, data reliability piece, because certainly in big organizations, but I suspect even in smaller organizations, that having a single view of employee is really challenging, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many customers, clients that we come across, prospective clients that we come across that can't tell us how many employees they've got.
No.
It's in this day and age, it's a surprise, but it's perfectly understandable given the tools that they've been working with. Once you see the tools, and if you're trying to do those things, track these things on spreadsheets and relying on people to send data in a timely fashion, that process always breaks down. So getting that single source of truth, again, massive benefit. So yeah, just back to the pack, have a look through the checklist. This is the key bit of the document. Obviously, there's a load of blurb there that you can refer to and give you some insight, but just having this sort of checklist, going through, understanding exactly what it is that will set you up for success and what those sort of gotchas are. Again, not only help you get into your project running, I think I talked to Lizzie about this a couple of times ago. Very often a client will say, we can do your implementation in X number of weeks, and it'll sound really fast. And then they'll come in and go, can you tell us about your organizational structure? And you'll go, well, it sort of works like this. And they'll go, well, we need it in a bit more detail than that. Can you go away and find out? And then we're into project running and overflowing and taking longer than we expected. And really, you're giving them a little bit of more time to not work at the pace that you originally set, and your scope creeps, your cost creeps, and so on and so forth. So you get into horrible pain. So yeah, getting through this is absolutely a good way of starting yourself off on the right footing.
Yeah, I agree. I think for me, it's about your vendor will obviously help you navigate through this stuff, but it's got to be your project. You know what I mean? Because it's a piece of technology, but it's not. It's supporting the business, and you have to have ownership of the business. And what I hope this program does for the ninjas is give them the confidence to own the project and to challenge their vendor rather than just be passive in the process, because that's where things can really go horribly wrong.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, hopefully most organizations have got someone in the HR space that's a little bit techy, understands some of this stuff, and can fight that corner for them. But if they haven't, it's really important that they get their arms around the project. It might be an IT-led project because you might have that burning platform we talked about. It might be an operations-led project because it's to do with workforce scheduling or whatever else. But generally speaking, all of these things cross over HR, and HR is in a perfect position to be leading this kind of implementation and getting that voice in the project, leading the project, sponsoring the project. And they absolutely should, because although I won't pretend these aren't difficult implementations in many cases. If you're doing a big organizational change, these products touch every part of the business. Those nuances that I talked about that are kind of complicated and kind of difficult are still minimum expectation for your end users and your customers. I expect to be able to do my PR regardless of the fact that my boss, my reporting manager, works in Cleveland or wherever it might be. So getting your arms around that and the business change side of it, really, really important. And as we said in the business case section, the benefits massively outweigh the difficulties and the costs for the few individuals that are going to be involved in delivering them. They really are transformational projects for the business.
Yeah.
Last thing for me to just touch on is organizational design is not a one-off thing. So when you draw your piece of paper at the beginning of the project and say, this is how our hierarchy is structured, we expect that to evolve and we expect it to continue and be able to change that. One of the hardest things to do in a systems implementation is do an org redesign in the middle of a project. So whilst it's completely unreasonable to say during the 9 months we're going to do this delivery, or 6 months we're going to do delivery. Nobody's allowed to transfer positions. As an organisation, what we shouldn't do is, right, we're completely going to restructure 90% of our business in the middle of a project. If you're considering doing that level of restructure, either do it first or do it after. All that you'll end up doing is spending the money of the project all over again.
Yeah.
Because a lot of other activities, as you said rightly earlier, the organization structure in the system is the skeleton of the system. It's the absolute backbone of it. And if you start moving it around, then the security all changes and has to be rewritten. The performance management bits change and have to be rewritten. So you're really doing your project all over again. So one of my biggest recommendations and watch outs is just being really clear with your senior stakeholders, even your exec team. If we're going to do this project, that's no org changes for the duration of that project. Or we do the project in 3 months' time after we've nailed these org changes and we've got those in, because as I say, it's just going to waste your money, waste your resource, waste your time, and it will hurt the brand of the project, because the expectations will be you should just be able to do that, and it's really not as straightforward as people assume.
Yeah. So, no, that makes sense.
So that's it for this week from a perspective of what we're sort of covering.
Sorry, Luke. Yeah, well, just a question, I guess. I'm thinking about the ninjas that watching this video and thinking, oh, damn, I don't have this. Where should they start in terms of tool? I mean, Excel, Visio, Power. Where should I start writing this stuff down?
Genuinely, it's about being able to articulate how things are structured. So from my perspective, if you've got a hierarchy chart with these people here, make sure it's up to date. That's the starting point. Go just track round with the people who are responsible for their part of the organizational structure and say, is that up to date? If it's not up to date, can you make it sure it's up to date by X time in 2 weeks' time, so that I can have a full view of the company from top to bottom of who sits where? And if there's people in transit, then let's make sure that we call those out and we understand who those are. We're currently hiring for X position, so we're expecting someone to be in situ by the time the project starts. Whatever those things are, the who it is not really that important at this stage. The positions and the names of those positions and where they report to, that's the thing that's important. So being able to be clear on that. So, don't get too hung up on, what format it's in, whether it's neat and tidy or coloured in, or, someone's took the crayons to it, whatever. It just needs to be clear to someone not from your business to be able to go, that's easy for me to articulate. I can literally take that and type it in. Yeah. So yes, so that, there are org tools out on the market, that are designed to do that. But, many of the HR system solutions come with org design features built in with them. So you'd only be duplicating your license fee if you went off and bought one specially to do this. I'd stick to PowerPoint or Excel or whatever else if it was me.
No, that's good. Thank you. I think that's it for me, Lee. I think it's been tremendously insightful for me. And certainly thank you for giving your time and your expertise to the Ninjas community to help educate us on this stuff. And whilst we hope if people are looking at systems, they'll take a look at Element Suite. That's not the point of this, right? The point of this is to get the information out there. So we really do appreciate it.
No, absolutely, and I'm really enjoying spending my time chatting with you guys and seeing the questions come up on the chat. It's good for us. I mean, for us, if people want to look at Element Suite, I'm really happy that they do that. But from my perspective, it's about getting the information out there, as you say, letting people have a look and helping them on that journey, because it is such a difficult transition to go from HR to tech. without any kind of sort of support. There's a very limited support network out there without spending a lot of money on a consultant to come in and do that joined up translation bit between you. So as much as we can help, I'm really happy to continue to do that.
Fab, and I look forward to the next instalment. I don't know if it'll be me or if it'll be Lizzie, but I shall watch it nonetheless.
Let's wait and see who've done a stalwart job in the interim. So thanks. Good to see you, Paul. Have a great evening.
See you. Thanks.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.